If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HassidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. The end of this week is Chai Elul, the 18th of Elul, which is the birthday of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov and also the Alter Rebbe. The Baal Shem Tov, of course, was the founder of Chassidus and all that followed afterwards. And the Alter Rebbe, who was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, who of course was the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, was the founder of Chabad Lubavitch Chassidim that many people in the modern Jewish world know about because of their outreach and Chabad houses around the world. Now, the Alter Rebbe never physically met the Baal Shem Tov, but the Alter Rebbe considered the Baal Shem Tov his spiritual grandfather because of his deep connection to the teachings of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. And so Chassidim, especially Chabad Chassidim, celebrate the day of Chai Elul as a Chassidic holiday. And so I'm going to bring to you, Be'ezrat Hashem, two stories, one of the Baal Shem Tov and the other of the Alter Rebbe. But before I begin, I want to dedicate this podcast episode in gratitude to our soldiers in battle. May Hashem keep them safe and help them be successful in their mission. The returning of all the hostages, whole, healthy, alive, and complete. The refuah shlema, the full recovery of everybody who's been injured or who is ill. The comforting of those that lost loved ones, and the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world. There was a family where the father gathered his 18 sons together, and he said to them, "Boys, you are now men, and you've all come of age. I'm going to give each of you a certain amount of money, and I want you to go out into the world and see what you can make of yourselves. This money should be enough to last you for the next 5 years. And after 5 years have passed, I would like you to all please come back home and tell me what you learned over that time. And if during that time you find a proper shidduch, somebody who you want to marry, please feel free to accept it. You have my blessing to marry whoever you like." And so the father distributed the money to each of his sons and sent them on their way, blessing each one that they be successful and that Hashem guide them wherever they go. And the 18 sons, they left the home that they grew up in, the home that they were born and raised in, and went out into the world with all the challenges and all of the opportunities that it held. Some of them didn't go too far, and others went very far away. And each of them found a yeshiva to settle in, to grow in their Torah knowledge, because that was the purpose that their father sent them out. And one of the sons, whose name was Yechiel Michal, he went all the way to Poland, because at the time, what is now Ukraine belonged to Poland. And in Poland, he became a student of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. And he spent his 5 years studying in Mezhibuz. And after the 5 years passed, came time to return to his father's home. Over those 5 years, Rabbi Yechiel Michal became so close with the Heilige Baal Shem Tov that eventually he married his daughter Edel, who some call Udel, depending on the tradition, Chabad, Breslov. And so before he went back home to his father, he went to his father-in-law, the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, and he said, "I want a blessing from you, please, before I go back. Now it's summer, and I'd like to have a blessing that I'll be here for Rosh Hashanah, Be'ezrat Hashem." And the Baal Shem Tov replied, "May you have success in a safe journey." And Rabbi Yechiel Michal, he said, "Rebbe, please, can you please bless me that I'll be back here for the Yomim HaNoraim, for the high holidays?" And once again, the Baal Shem Tov said, "May you reach your father's home quickly and return safely, my dear son." But Rabbi Yechiel Michal, he wanted an answer from the Rebbe. And he said, "Heilige Baal Shem Tov, I want to be here for Rosh Hashanah. Can you please tell me that I'll be here for Rosh Hashanah?" And now the third time he said, "May your father rejoice in the Torah that you learned here, and may you return here safely, Be'ezrat Hashem." So now Yechiel Michal, he understood that he wasn't going to be in Mezhibuz for Rosh Hashanah, at least that year. And he had no idea where he was going to stay for the holiday. And Rabbi Yechiel Michal, he left the Baal Shem Tov's Beit Midrash and returned home to find all 17 of his brothers had grown in the Torah, learning, and wisdom. And the father was very happy to have all of his children back. All of them have gotten married over the 5 years. And the father made a huge feast for them and invited many of the town's rabbis and distinguished people. The feast began in the afternoon. And between each course, each of the brothers was going to stand up and give a Devar Torah that he had learned over the last 5 years, so that his father could shep naches, could reap spiritual pleasure in the progress that his sons had made over the past 5 years. And they started with the oldest son and continued on with the next one and the next one, and each of them spoke brilliant words of Torah. And the father was shining. He was already an old man, but each word of Torah from his sons warmed his aging heart. There was only one son that was not pleasing to his father, and that was the 8th son, Rabbi Chiel Michal. He sat by the table and only looked at his plate. While all of his older brothers spoke, he didn't look up once and continued eating through all of their speaking. And the father thought it was chutzpah, and he decided that later, in private, he was going to give it to his son. Now the father didn't know anything about the Baal Shem Tov, and he didn't realize that eating can be an act of holiness, that eating in a kosher way with somebody who had total emunah and had studied so much Torah and Chassidus could reach the elevation of unifying Hashem and the Shekhinah, which, by the way, is Torah Samech Bet 62 in the Likutei Moran, which is a class that I'm teaching, which is how I know. And you can find it on YouTube. If you just look up my name, Barak Hullman, you'll see my lessons in the Likutei Moran. So while Yechiel Michal was sitting and eating, his father thought he was being chutzpahdik. And now it was Yechiel Michal's turn to speak and display the Torah knowledge that he had learned. But he asked to skip. And all of the townspeople and the rabbis and the family and all the brothers, they looked at Yechiel Michal in amazement. His father gives him a fortune. He goes away for 5 years. He learns by the Baal Shem Tov, and he has nothing to say? And look at him ignoring his brothers and just eating his food? So they went on to the 9th son, who gave over a Dvar Torah, and they kept going down the line until everybody had said what they had to say. And already it was nighttime, and everybody left the meal. And now the father called his 8th son over to him, and he said to him, in your 5 years away, you didn't learn any better manners? You didn't learn any Torah? You embarrassed me in front of my important guests. What have you been doing with yourself for the last 5 years? Taking lessons and eating and ignoring people? I had great plans for you, my son. I thought you were going to be a great person. And the old man wept in front of his son. But Yechiel Michal said to his father, please don't be sad. You're not understanding what happened. I have actually learned more Torah than all of my brothers, big or small. And the father said, really? And Yechiel Michal said, you can have another Suda tomorrow. You're welcome to invite the same people, and I'll give you an example of what I learned by the Heilig Baal Shem Tov. I promise you, Father, you won't be disappointed. And so the next day, in the afternoon, the same people came back for once again a festive meal. And so the father said, we'll go through the same order as yesterday. And the older son got up to speak, and after a few minutes, Yechiel Michal got up and passed his hand in front of the speaker. And the oldest brother became confused and started confessing some of his past sins. When he realized what he was saying, he was terribly embarrassed and sat down. The next son was called up, and he was going to go deeper into the Devar Torah that he gave the day before. But once again, Yechiel Michal passed his hand in front of his brother's eyes, and the brother became confused and also admitted past sins. When he realized what he had said, he simply sat down without finishing his thoughts. And this happened all the way down the line until it was Yechiel Michal's turn. And so everybody asked Yechiel Michal, what are you doing? What is the meaning of this strange thing of wiping your hand in front of everybody's face and they're admitting sins? If yesterday you were acting chutzpahdik and ignoring everyone, today this is even stranger. And Yechiel Michal smiled, and he started talking about his father-in-law, the Baal Shem Tov. He told about his greatness in Torah and davening, and his love for his fellow Jews. And he gave them a taste of the wisdom that he had learned by his father-in-law and astounded everyone with what he had known. That day, the people at the meal heard things they'd never heard before. For example, that when a person wants to do tshuva, wants to come close to Hashem, Hashem puts an obstacle in the way. Because Hashem wants to know, does this person actually want to do tshuva? Or they just say they're doing tshuva? And Hashem hides himself, as it were, in the obstacle itself. And if somebody has da'at, meaning that they have an awareness of Hashem's presence in the world, they will know that every time that Hashem puts an obstacle in the way, they can find Hashem in that obstacle. and Moshe Rabbeinu, being the person that had the most da'at, the most awareness of Hashem's presence in this world, more than anyone else, he always searched for Hashem in the obstacles. And so when we have a challenge or an obstacle, especially one that's blocking us from growing in our connection with Hashem, we should go towards it and not run away from it, knowing that Hashem is sitting inside, urging us to come and overcome the obstacle. So he shared words of Torah like that, and of course, Yechiel Michal, being married to the Baal Shem Tov's daughter, was the grandfather of the Heilige Rebbe Nachman, whose Torah I just quoted to you. That's Torah Kuf Tet Vav, by the way. So now the father was very impressed with his son, and also the Baal Shem Tov. And so was everybody at the meal. The father was now beaming as his son spoke. And the brothers remained together for several days, and then each went on their way as they had before. And Yechiel Michal, he left his proud father and went back to Mezhibuz, knowing that he wouldn't be spending Rosh Hashanah there, but not knowing exactly where he would be. And he got on a ship. I should have taken him within a few days' time to Poland, but Hashem had other plans in mind. There was a storm in the middle of the sea. It carried the ship far off course, and the winds kept going until it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. And then they saw land, and the ship landed there, and everybody got off the ship in some strange, faraway island. Yechiel Michal, realizing that it was Erev Chag, he did what he could to prepare. In the short amount of time that was left, he went into the sea that was his mikvah, and knowing that he wouldn't be in Mezhibuz for Rosh Hashanah, he had a machzor with him, and he had a shofar, and all of the other people on the ship were watching Yechiel Michal, not understanding exactly what he was doing. They saw him bowing and twisting, singing, shouting, jumping around, and then he took out the shofar and started blowing it. Yechiel Michal didn't realize that people were staring at him, but when he blew the shofar the next day, a huge crowd showed up, and the king of the island, who happened to pass by, wanted to understand what was going on, and he sent a messenger to Yechiel Michal to ask him to come to the king. Yechiel Michal followed the messenger and explained to the king that I am a Jew, and today is our day of judgment. And he said he's a Chassid of the Baal Shem Tov, he's a great rabbi and teacher, and for some reason Hashem decided that he was going to be on this island for this very holy day. And the king asked that the young man, Yechiel Michal, remain with him in the palace. But Yechiel Michal said, Your Honor, the holy day concludes tomorrow night, and then I'm very happy to come and speak with the king, but until then I need to keep praying. And so when Rosh Hashanah was over, Yechiel went to the palace of the king. They spoke about many topics, worldly topics, spiritual topics. The king was very impressed with the answers that Yechiel Michal was able to give. And the king said, I want you to bring 300 Jews to this island. I will build homes for them and provide for them. You are very special people. And Yechiel Michal said, Your Highness, there's 2 reasons why I can't do that. First, even if I said to people, come and move to this island, nobody's going to listen to me. Everybody already has their communities, and they'd like to stay where they are. And second, had the Almighty HaKadosh Baruch Hu desired that there be Jews in your land, he would have brought them here himself, even against their will, even if they were bound in iron chains. But since I'm the only Jew here, it's clear that Hashem does not want the Jews to be residing on your island. The king was very impressed, and he let the matter go. He thanked Yechiel Michal for coming and blowing the shofar, and gave his blessings to him that he have a safe journey back. And sure enough, the next day, the ship was ready to return to Poland. And this time the trip was uneventful. Rabbi Yechiel Michal arrived safely and went straight to the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, who listened and nodded as he told the Baal Shem Tov everything that happened to him. The Baal Shem Tov said, Your answer to the king was a very good one, because it's true there's no reason for Jews to live on that island. The only reason that you had to spend Rosh Hashanah there was for your sincere prayers and your shofar blowing to elevate and uplift the sparks of holiness that were on that island. And if you had not been there, it truly would have been necessary for Hashem to bring a Jewish community in iron chains to accomplish that same goal. But now that you were there and you spent Rosh Hashanah there, there's no need for any Jew to ever have to go there. And Baruch Hashem, they never will. You know, one of the things I love about the story in Yechiel Michal is he had no doubts. He didn't have any complaints. He knew he wasn't going to spend Rosh Hashanah in Mezhibuz, and here he ends up in one of the most uncomfortable places. Nothing is there for him, but he simply knows, Rosh Hashanah, I'm a Jew, I'm a Chassid, I'm going to do what I have to do, even if it isn't with my family and with the ideal conditions. And not only did he do what he had to do, but he did it in order to elevate the sparks of holiness that were hidden in that place. And so too with us, my sweetest friends. Sometimes we end up in a place or a circumstance that we don't understand, and we can remember how Yechiel Michal dealt with his circumstances, and daven with passion and trust in Hashem and enthusiasm. Be'ezrat Hashem, you will elevate the holy sparks wherever you are.
Hi, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Halelai, lai, 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 amai, lili, lai, 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 halelai, lai, lai, lili, lai, 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 lili, lai, lai, lai,
I have one more story for you. Everyone knows that Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi was known as the Alter Rebbe. And one time he came to a small town, and when he was staying there was a fire that broke out. Now, in Eastern Europe, in those days, in the 1700s, all of the homes were made of wood. The fire would spread very quickly, jumping from one home to the next, and could, God forbid, burn down the entire village. And so a fire in a town like that was a very big deal. The local firemen had a hard time extinguishing the fire. Soldiers were brought from a nearby station to try to help as well, but there was a strong wind and was fanning the flames. Sparks were flying in the air, and the sparks were going and lighting trees and other homes as well. And several of the townspeople had heard that the Alter Rebbe was a great tzaddik, and they went and told him what happened. The Alter Rebbe said, "Show me where the fire is." And they led him to the blazing house. And he stood there leaning on his walking cane, staring at the fire intensely for a few minutes. And suddenly the wind stopped, and the fire stopped jumping from house to house. And then the fire started to subside. And within a few minutes, the fire was under control, and the firemen could put it out. And everyone, of course, was relieved. The town was saved. But greater than that miracle was the miracle of the Rebbe, who simply leaned on his cane and stared at the fire and put it out. The soldiers returning back to their base told the general of the miracle that they had seen with their own eyes. The general asked his orderly to go and bring the Rebbe before him. When Rabbi Shner Zalman walked into the general's quarters, the general stood up and bowed his head, taking off his hat as a sign of respect to the Rebbe. And the general says to him, "Do you happen to be a son or a grandson of the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov?" And the Alter Rebbe said, "I am indeed a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, but not in a physical sense, in a spiritual sense, because I am a student of the successor of the Baal Shem Tov." And the general said, "Well, then my conclusion is correct, and I'm not at all surprised that you would be able to stare at a fire and put it out." And then the general brought out a leather-bound book, opened it up, and he said, "Let me tell you what happened to my late father, which he recorded here in his diary. It happened when my father was stationed with his troops near the town of Mezhibuz. He had been away for a very long time, and his wife was pregnant, and he was very worried, and he hadn't heard from her, seeing how stressed the general was. Some of the soldiers said, 'We heard that there's a great rabbi living in this town, and his name is Master of the Good Name, Baal Shem Tov. People say that he can do miracles, that he can see from one end of the world to the other. Why don't you go to this holy man, and maybe he can help you?' And so he said, my father, the general, decided there was nothing he could lose by going to the Baal Shem Tov, and he sent his orderly to arrange a visit. And the orderly returned and told my father that the Baal Shem Tov was too busy. He couldn't make an appointment for the general. And this made the general furious, and he sent the orderly back to the Baal Shem Tov, and he said if the Baal Shem Tov refuses to see him, that my father, the general, is going to have soldiers live in the Jewish homes. And by law, they would have to provide all of the food and lodging for all of my soldiers. Now, the Jews in Mezhibuz were poor, and they didn't want treif-eating Goyish soldiers living in their homes. But also it happened to be right near the holiday of Passover, and the soldiers would bring chametz into the Jewish homes. And when the orderly returned this time, he brought an answer that even though the Baal Shem Tov is too busy, he would make time to meet the general. And when the appointed time arrived, my father and his orderly came to the house of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. And through a door leading from the living room, they could see the Baal Shem Tov sitting in his room with his head bent over a book. And there was a little mirror hanging on the wall. And so the general, out of habit, went and looked in the mirror in order to straighten out his hair. But when his father, the general, went to the small mirror, instead of seeing a reflection of his own face, he saw a road that looked familiar to him. It was the road leading to his own hometown. And not believing what he was seeing and thinking that his imagination was playing games with him, he called his orderly over to the mirror. And the orderly saw the same thing. The two of them saw it themselves. The road seemed to pass by them, and they found themselves on the street where the general and his family lived. And then they saw the door of the house of the general open up, and then my father saw his wife sitting there at her desk writing a letter. And as if the general and the orderly were looking over her shoulder, they saw that she was writing a letter to the general. And in it she apologized for not writing in such a long time, because the pregnancy and the birth were so difficult. But now she wanted to congratulate him on the birth of a boy and say that both she and the baby are doing fine, and she was looking forward to his return so that he could meet his son. And the general who's talking to the Alter Rebbe says, you can imagine how excited my father was. Forgetting where he was, he ran back to his quarters, and there on his desk was a letter from his wife. He opened it and read it again and again, and it was exactly the letter with the exact same words and the exact same handwriting that he had seen in the mirror in the Baal Shem Tov's house. And the general says to the Alter Rebbe, I am that son that my mother wrote to my father about in that letter. And then he shows the diary. He says, you can see the whole story recorded by my father right here. And then the general asked the Alter Rebbe to please bless him. And the Rebbe replied, if you are good to the Jews, Hashem will be good to you. Because it's written in the Torah regarding Avraham Avinu, Ki varech evarecha, that I will bless those that bless you. And so if you are good to the Jews, Hashem will be good to you. Thank you so much for listening, my sweetest friends. As always, I want to thank all the supporters and all the YouTube listeners and all the Spotify listeners. And wherever you listen, thank you for listening. Thank you for being in touch. And thank you for all the contributions. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're getting closer to Rosh Hashanah. Hashem, please send me the energy to cook all this food and to have the energy for davening and the right state of mind. And of course, the money to pay for it all, Be'ezrat Hashem. And for all of you as well, my sweetest friends. So until next week, have a good Shabbos, have a good week, and sei gesund.